My supervisor actually said to me, one thing that I think would help you a lot is to become more comfortable with f***ing up. I was like, yeah, I really need to change my life and do something about this. There's this misconception that perfectionism is one of those problems that's not really a problem because we think that it motivates us more to achieve more. And while yes, there is some truth to that, like, yeah, it can push you to achieve a lot more in the short term. In the long term, it's the recipe to burning out. It's the recipe to living a life of achieving a lot but never feeling satisfied. And so ultimately, despite whatever people say about perfectionism motivating you, it actually does the opposite in the long run and demotivates you or unmotivates you. I don't know which one's the correct word or if they're both words, but I'm not going to be a perfectionist about that. Perfectionism can actually limit you. It can actually prevent your life from expanding because, like I said, if you are convinced that you cannot engage in a task unless you can do it 100% perfectly, there's not many things that you can do then in life. You're going to be less likely to want to try new things or to embark on truly challenging tasks because there's a very big chance that you'll screw up and you can't handle that. And so you avoid any situation where you could possibly fail at all costs, and that dramatically shrinks your life. And so perfectionism in the long run limits you rather than motivates you. And if it does motivate you, it's a motivation created by fear as opposed to love, as opposed to passion, as opposed to conviction. Okay, so in terms of key takeaways of what you can do to heal from your struggle with perfectionism, well, one thing you can do is to transform your relationship to failure. Because, like I said, beneath the perfectionism, the constant striving to achieve more, or even the avoiding of situations where you might fail, is, as you expect, the fear of failure. And it's not just the fear of failure itself, it's the belief that that failure means something about you as a person, as an individual. And so that is what you want to change. Because if you believe that if you fail, it means you're a worthless human being. If you believe that if you fail, it means you're screwed for basically the rest of your life in a dramatically life-altering way all the time, and if you believe that if you fail, it means that you are permanently incompetent, like not just incompetent now, today, in this instance, but forever incompetent and just doomed, then of course, whenever you fail, it's going to feel supercharged and super heavy and super intense and super defining. Like you feel defined by your failure. Of course, it's going to feel like that. It makes perfect sense why you might want to avoid failure at all costs, either by overachieving or avoiding new challenging situations. If you believe that the failure means something personal about you, that you yourself are a failure. So instead of seeing things that way, try to develop a more empowering relationship to failure, where you view failure as just a normal part of life that happens to everybody, where you view failure as just part of the process of getting better, of striving towards your goals. It's just like embedded in the journey along with the successes, and that's fine. And when you view failure as an opportunity to learn profound lessons, then that's gonna soften your response to failure. You're not gonna feel so frightened to make a mistake. You're not gonna feel defined by your mistake. And you may be surprised by how much your life transforms if you change your relationship to failure in that way. Your life will expand because, again, you are more willing to try new things or to take on meaningful, difficult challenges, even if you might screw up in the beginning, because yeah, you're not so scared of screwing up and you can start to, like I said, expand. And related to the topic of transforming your relationship to failure is to increase your tolerance for failure. So, to give you an example of something that I actually did in my life, it sounds kind of crazy, but I made it a goal for me to intentionally put myself in situations where I might possibly fail or I could possibly make a complete fool out of myself, and I intentionally threw myself into these situations over and over and over again and actually kept a record of these things so that I could celebrate them, because I knew that in the past I would just try to avoid failure at all costs, and that limited me dramatically. So I did these things on purpose so I could get used to the feeling of failing. I could get used to the blush in my cheeks when I embarrass myself or whatever, so that I could train myself to realizing that it's not actually a big deal, and that it isn't permanent, and that it doesn't define me. And I celebrated these moments because it meant I was growing and expanding and trying new things, meeting new people, and just like living my life. So, yeah, so that's a challenge that you could possibly try to do yourself as well. And the second thing you can do is to be very intentional about celebrating your achievements and pausing for a second instead of moving on to the next thing. Pause for a moment and relish all that you accomplished. Because again, when we get stuck in the cycle of perfectionism, sometimes it feels like nothing is ever good enough. We obsess over the small mistake that we made, and we completely discount the amazing work we did in other areas of that project, for example. And so in this case, you would intentionally try to learn from your mistake, but not get caught up on with it to the point that you obsess over it, and instead you emphasize celebrating all the great work that you did, because it deserves to be recognized by you, if not anyone else. And the third thing that you can do is to try to develop more realistic expectations for yourself. And I'm not saying that you should aim low and just be mediocre and not have high standards. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's amazing for you to shoot for the stars. It's amazing that you believe in high quality work. That's great. But when your expectations become unattainable, like almost no one can attain them, that's just a recipe for disaster that you actually have the power to change. So, yeah, just develop more realistic expectations. That doesn't mean it's not high expectations, because high expectations are good, but not over the top, is what I'm saying. My profound wake-up call when it comes to perfectionism happened a few years ago when I first got hired for a new job. So I knew that I was qualified for the job, because obviously I wouldn't have gotten hired if I wasn't. But I also knew that I wasn't 100% qualified. There was still a learning curve, and there was still room for me to grow into the role. And because I knew that, I was extremely uncomfortable. And by uncomfortable, I mean like hyperventilating. I mean like sleepless nights every day, always tense, my body constantly in stress mode. It was not fun, and it was not healthy psychologically or even physically. So all of this led me to actually resigning from the job after just 2 weeks of working there. 2 freaking weeks. I am so embarrassed to admit that, but it is true, because the imposter syndrome was running through my head like crazy. Like, I truly believed that the best thing I could do for this organization was to step aside so that someone more competent could come in. Like, I really felt as if I was just a liability rather than an asset, that had fooled everyone into thinking I was competent, but it was only a matter of time until they realized that I wasn't. So I was doing them a favor by doing the job for them and stepping aside before any of them found out. And so, yeah, that is why I tried to quit. But thankfully, I had the best bosses out there, and my supervisor actually sat me down for coffee and convinced me not to quit. That conversation was life-changing because my bosses said to me, they were like, you know what, Celine, you actually have expectations for yourself that none of us actually have of you. Like, you think that we expect you to be X, Y, and Z, when actually we are perfectly fine with you being A, B, and C. And so your overly high expectations of yourself, you projected it onto us, but we actually don't have those expectations towards you. My supervisor went on to say that life is an iterative process where it's okay if you fail. It's okay if you make a mistake. All that matters is that you learn from it and then you do better next time. After that conversation, I found that the quality of my work got so much better. Like, I was free of the pressure to have everything perfect, that I started to develop a more experimental attitude towards my work. And that led me to doing truly creative stuff. Because it's true, perfectionism is the enemy of innovation. It's the enemy of creativity. You need to give yourself the space to screw up or to think of ridiculous ideas before you can formulate the best ones. And so, if you are a supervisor out there, you might want to take some notes. So that's it for this video. If you like this video, please do like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help me reach more people. And please do share this with anyone who you think needs to hear these words, because I know I'm not the only perfectionist out there.